Right, so for some time now there's been some confusion regarding which chip the 15-inch MacBook Air is getting. Some think it's M2, others think it's M3, and now Gurman chimes in, so let's delve into what he thinks. So Gurman, as per usual, doesn't straight up tell us what's going to be the case, but he says we should see a processor on par with the M2, so I'm assuming that means M3's not coming as soon as we thought. Now, how does Gurman know this? Well, a 15-inch MacBook Air has been spotted in App Store developer logs, and it has an 8-core CPU and a 10-core GPU with 8GB of RAM. This is basically equivalent to the non-binned base M2 Air. And so if Gurman really is suggesting M2's coming to this MacBook Air, that's a huge bummer, because this chip's already been out for nearly a year, and we know M3's right around the corner with the 3nm process, and so that upgrade with the new size option would have been quite nice. However, I can also understand why Apple's considering sticking with M2, because if you guys have seen recent sales stats for Macs, you would know there's been a whopping 40% drop in year-over-year sales, and that's a massive drop in sales. Now yes, in last year's quarter Apple released the 2021 MacBook Pros, and we got the M2 Max and Pro MacBooks much later than expected, but it still does seem to suggest demand for Macs are not as high as they used to be. This has been the case for most PC manufacturers, and it makes sense considering we are in a recession and people are less likely to spend money on an expensive MacBook. But also the Apple Silicon Macs saw huge demand initially because work from home was a big thing, but that slowly faded too. So from a business perspective, spending tons of money to produce brand new M3 chips and release them in this Mac might not make sense when consumer spending is low. Instead, they can just go for the cheaper route, re-release the MacBook Air M2 in a new size, and boom, there's some additional buzz that could help create sales, and Apple can keep using M2 chips that have likely become cheaper to produce since they've been in production for a while. So in a way, it's similar to the mid-year color refresh Apple does with iPhones, and ultimately the average consumer who's in the market for a large non-pro MacBook are gonna buy this even if it has M2, so going for the cheaper route and reusing M2, something I could see Apple do. Also, you could argue an M3 MacBook Air could cannibalize the base M2 Pro MacBook Pro 14-inch since it would be more powerful because of the 3nm process, though the argument is a little weak because the 14-inch will have more ports, a better display, and better cooling. But the cost reason I just mentioned, I can definitely see that being the case, and especially if Apple and TSMC only have the capacity to produce A17 chips on the 3nm process, they're definitely going to prioritize the iPhone, and I guess we're sticking with them too. And by the way, would like to remind you guys, like this video and subscribe for more content like this. It would be appreciated. Anyways, I do want to quickly mention something interesting that Gurman mentioned, and that is, he said the 15-inch Air found in the log does have the same screen resolution as the 14-inch MacBook Pro, which I did not expect because it's a bigger display, so the PPI would be less, but hopefully the display doesn't look a lot worse. And on top of this, we now have news from Digitimes that suppliers are now stockpiling 15-inch MacBook Airs, so yeah, that does suggest a June release. But Digitimes does say the momentum for the 15-inch is not as strong as other recent releases. Now let's delve into your questions. So Nathan Reedy says, I was originally going to wait for this machine, but as I've done my research, and if the 15-inch starts at $13.99 to $14.99, as has been rumoured and based off other product lines, a $200 increase for a bigger screen size appears to be the pattern. I'm not a pro user by any means, but I do desire the ports on the 14-inch MacBook Pro, and the fact that machine has active cooling and a more powerful chip than I likely will ever need, and I would be speccing up the Air if I got it to 16 gigs of RAM and 2TB of storage. That would put me within $200 of a 14-inch M2 Pro MacBook Pro, not including the dock for ports on the Air. So in the end, for me, it's more cost effective to get a 14-inch here in a couple of months as soon as I save enough money. And fair enough, in fact, a part of me thinks Apple's going to intentionally price this to upsell consumers to the 14-inch like they did with the M2 MacBook Air. But I will say the base model will likely do very well because average Joes don't really spend more on RAM and storage, and even at $14.99 this is considerably cheaper than the base 14-inch while giving you the additional real estate. So Sweeler Max says, looking forward to it, but I think I'm gonna pay $16.99 for a 16 gig RAM model. And yes, Apple as per usual is gonna charge a lot for RAM and storage, and to be honest, I think it's time they make 512 gigs of storage and 16 gigs around the standard option, because nearly every PC manufacturer around the same price offers that, and for today's standards, 256 gigs of storage and 8 gigs of RAM is simply not enough. So C said, I wish the M3 MacBook Air does support 2 displays, maybe max 2 5K or 1 6K, and SD cards. Maybe Apple for user to pay the full power M3 version to get the dual display support, which makes some sense, and 15-inch is the only one to come with SD card as standards, and 13-inch needs so upgrades, just like M1 iMac comes with 2 and 4 USB-C version. Now regarding support for 2 displays, I could see that coming to all M3 Macs, but regarding the SD card reader, I'm sorry, I doubt we're gonna see that on the 15-inch. Even if this Mac has the power for professional use, Apple's main target audience are students and regular consumers who are likely never going to be using an SD card reader. Also remember that for people like you, Apple wants you to spend the extra cash on the MacBook Pro and get all the ports, because Apple's Apple's. Yes, I would not expect to see that. So Georgia Orochima says, what if the MacBook Air 13/15, Mac Pro, and VR headsets all get the M3 chip? Well, I used to think that could be the case, but now I do have my doubts. The VR headset and the Mac Pro we can be somewhat sure are getting a variant of the M2, and as for the 15-inch MacBook Air, Gurman now says that's also sticking to M2, so yes, if you want M3, you might have to wait a little longer. So Run for Peace 2020 says, my GF would only buy a MacBook Pro because she sees herself as a professional even though she only needs the computing power of a MacBook Air. That's the target market. Oh, also touch bar and battery life. So I often see this argument online since people like knowing they have a pro machine even if it's not really that pro. And while yes, I do agree there is a market that thinks like that, keeping this model ultimately complicates the range for normies. Why do they need 3 different options at the low end? I'm sure Apple's sales will be just fine if they make the lineup simpler to understand and just offer the Air in 2 sizes. Also with the battery life argument, it's not that big of a difference that you can justify having an overall worse experience, and once we see M3 that's going to be more efficient, the Air should be able to catch up. As for the touch bar, as I said earlier, people should learn to live without it, because it's something Apple does not include with newer MacBooks. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you for watching.